Hi everybody, today I went out shooting with a Tokina 11-16mm DX2 ATX Pro wide-angle lens. This lens is designed to be used specifically with Canon APSC sensors, so I took it out with my Canon 7D. I've had this lens for several years, but I haven't really used it all that much since I'm really not a landscape photographer, but for landscapes, you can't beat this. Again, the Tokina runs from 11 to 16 millimeters in focal length, making it ultra wide angle. This yields a true focal length of 17 to 25 millimeters, which is still very, very wide. Another really appealing feature about this lens is the f2.8 aperture. Makes it really, really good in low light, as you'll see in a couple shots coming up. Also, there's 9 blades in the aperture. It's very high quality, and it's quiet too. The lens itself is pretty heavy, and it feels really good, solid, and high quality when you hold it. A unique feature on this is shifting from autofocus to manual focus. You can see by the ring in the front, it's in autofocus mode right now. So all you do to get to manual focus is just pull this ring back. It clicks into place. You can see where it's MF for manual focus, and it's very easy to use. Takes a little getting used to though. The Tokina 11-16 is priced at $449 new, which is not really cheap, but I've seen them around $250 US up used. If you're an APS-C based sensor photographer and you want to get into landscapes and urban photography, then you might want to buy a new one of these things. This is a shot of the sand dunes up in northern Michigan, and it's a good lens for this type of work. It's kind of really nice and wide, and you kind of get a good feel of what the dunes are really like. This was shot on an old Canon T2i and 11 millimeters focal length. This was also shot on a Canon T2i in Key West, Florida. This is Mallory Square, and you can see I really didn't correct for the lens. It's not too bad looking straight up. It's kind of a cool angle. Here's some rental kayaks. These were shot in northern Michigan, and again with a T2i, and it's kind of a nice effect. I like how this lens captures the sky and clouds. This is another shot in northern Michigan of a farmer's field. I really like the way the sky looked. I like the parallel lines in the wheat. I like the barrels, how they lined up with the windmills. And again, this lens really captures the sky well. In order to really get the blackness of the sky, I use a polarizing filter, which they aren't cheap for this size lens. The filter size is 77 millimeters for this lens, so if you want to get a polarizer and some ND filters, it's going to cost you a little bit of money. And I think this was shot at about 14 millimeters. Again, it's right that same farm, that's the barn to it, and of course in color. I used a polarizer on this also. This was shot in Key West, Florida at 16 millimeters, and I did a little bit of post-processing in Lightroom on this. I really like the effect of this shot. I don't think I could have really gotten the same feel to it using any other lens. And this was also shot on a T2i, so it doesn't matter what camera you're using with this lens. Your shots are going to come out pretty good. Here's another shot at an open-air shop in Key West, Florida. This was shot, it was dark outside, just way beyond dusk, and lens at 2.8 really does well in low light. Here's another low light shot, and you can see in the background the sun's going down rapidly. Same situation here on f2.8, just shot with the natural light that was in the shop. So here's the shots I took today. I just want to get some railroad tracks, some grungy industrial stuff, and some pastoral stuff too. So here's a really good thing. Here's why I shoot in RAW. A lot of times I'll forget about white balance. It's just something that I do. And this white balance was custom. It leaned more towards tungsten. And I'm glad I went down and just looked at the shot and the LCD display in the camera. Otherwise, I would have shot the entire sequence using this. So, of course, I corrected for the rest of the shots the white balance. So, always shoot in RAW, because when you go and post-process it, you can change it. I mean, it was just one click in Lightroom to change it to normal. But if these were shot in JPEGs, you could not do that, and you would be screwed on this entire shoot. In most post-processing software, you can correct for the lens. Lightroom, you do it, and I corrected for the Tokina 11-16, in Lightroom, and I didn't like it. It kind of really warped it. This is non-corrected. All the rest of the images are non-corrected. It just seems to work better. And if you look at it, it's not bad. Look at the edges. There's not much vignetting. There's not much aberration, anything like that. The lines are pretty good and straight. So this shows you the quality of the optics in this lens. Really, really good. I had the 7D on a monopod for this, and I tried to get down low and kind of tilt the camera a little bit to see what kind of weirdness would come out of this lens, and actually not much at all. It just looks pretty good. You know, these photographs aren't anything special, but they can be. If you use these things like I do for composite photography, these tracks are worth their weight in gold. So go out and shoot a whole bunch of stuff that, not just for the aesthetics of the picture, but shoot it for the component parts for a composite. You'll be really glad you did. And I got closer to the tracks, nice and clear in focus for the focal length, and I'm sure I'm going to use these in a composite somewhere. I got down low for this shot, and again I'll use it in a composite, and I did shoot entirely in manual mode for these. For a composite image, all I'll really do here is just cut out the tracks using the pen tool in Photoshop, and then maybe just save this to a library of train track images. These next few images show the variance when you change the focal length. This was shot at 11mm, so you can see very wide angle. This was shot at 13mm, and I was a lot closer to the fence than it looked. And this was shot at 16mm, and I actually had to hold the camera over the fence a little bit. Again, extreme wide angle lens, but look at the kind of even the breadth of the image shot at 16mm, which is not bad. And again, on this image and all the other images, I did not use lens correction. So just to balance the industrial images, I went to a pond that's not too far from my house. All of these were shot at a 16mm focal length. And again, this was shot straight out of the camera with no post-processing and no lens correction. So at 16mm, this is pretty good for wide angle, but a much tighter composition. This is a nice tight shot, and at 16mm, you won't experience any vignetting. Speaking of vignetting, here's a shot taken with a Canon 5D Mark III full-frame sensor camera. 35mm, and this is 35mm. You get the true focal length. The sensor is much larger than that on an APS-C camera. So what happens when you put the Tokina 11-16 on this, especially at 11mm? Here you go. It turns it into like a big fishnet lens. It looks like the album cover for the first Byrds album or the Jimi Hendrix album, the first one. So it's kind of a cool thing if you want to use it on a full frame camera if you have one. I don't use it, but it's available to you if you choose to. So all in all, is this a good lens? In my opinion, yes. It's very well built. It's solid. The autofocus to manual focus little switch is unique, but it's very, very useful. You don't have to fiddle with any settings in the back of the camera. Again, it's solid, and if you're an APS-C sensor-based photographer, then this is really a good wide-angle lens to purchase. I really recommend it. Again, like I said before, I'm not really a landscape photographer, but the more I'm starting to use this lens, the more I'm really starting to like it and plan on using it a lot more. So, thanks for watching. As always, this is Jeff, and I'll talk with you soon.